She texted "miss you" to a dead number. The number texted back, "Listen, K-fam, let me set the scene for you." A storm hammers a cold, cramped apartment. Evelyn Harper, 28, a Black freelance manuscript editor, works past midnight, proofreading other people's novels by the page. The overdue rent is pinned to the fridge. On a video call, her boss, Douglas Pruitt, cuts her rate again, mid-sentence. She touches the silver necklace her grandmother left her. Then she does what she does every lonely night. She types into a phone that never answers. "Good night, miss you." The screen goes dark. Then it lights up. "Read." It buzzes. "Not as much as me, Omo." And that is when she hears it. A notification tone. A deep, heavy chime. Coming from the other side of her locked wooden door. His name is Seo Tae-hyun. They call him the Crow. 6'4", wrapped in black Italian wool. A sumi-e crow inked across his neck that only shows when he tilts his head. He owns the number. He owns the cameras. He owns the whole block. And through that closed door, in the dark, he starts reciting the exact fears she had been typing for months. K-fam, I got chills just telling you this part. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Evelyn crossed out the same sentence for the third time, and this time, she pressed hard enough to tear the page. The pen went straight through. She stopped. She looked at the little rip in the paper like it had insulted her mother. Then she set the pen down real slow, because if she picked it back up too fast, she was gonna throw it, and she only had the one. The lamp buzzed. That cheap yellow buzz they do right before they die. She reached up and thumped the shade with 2 fingers, the way you burp a baby, and the buzz cut out and the light steadied. Good. Not tonight. Not with 40 pages left. The apartment held the cold like a fist. Old building, thin bones. She could feel the storm pushing on the window glass, that low shove of wind that made the frame tick in its socket. Tick, tick, like a knuckle knocking to be let in. She pulled the cream sweater tighter across her chest and tucked her hands up into the sleeves and kept reading with just her eyes moving. Chapter 19. Somebody else's Chapter 19. Somebody else's name would go on the spine of this book, and somebody else would smile in the little author photo, and Evelyn Harper would be nowhere, a ghost in the acknowledgments if she was lucky, and she was never lucky. That was the job. You take the mess and you make it sing and you hand it back and you say thank you. Ghostwriter. Fancy word for a woman who feeds a machine that never once learns her face. She marked a comma splice. She fixed a tense that jumped. She rewrote a line of dialogue so a dead man sounded alive again, and for 1 second the work grabbed her the way it used to, back when she thought this was going to be a stepping stone and not the whole staircase. Then the wind hit the window again, and the second got away from her. Her stomach growled. She ignored it. She was good at that. She read the next paragraph twice and understood none of it, so she read it a third time with a finger under the line like a child, dragging the finger word to word, and made herself hear it. There, a metaphor that landed wrong. A woman in the story crying like a broken faucet. She crossed it out. She wrote something truer in the margin, small, tight letters, because the margin was small and so was everything. She always fixed the crying scenes the hardest. She didn't ask herself why. The radiator in the corner clanked once, a hopeful clank, like it was about to give her heat, and then it went cold and silent again. A promise it had made 100 times and broken 100 times. She'd stopped bleeding it weeks ago. You learn which things in a life will answer you and which things won't, and you stop wasting your breath on the ones that won't. On the little kitchenette table, 3 feet away, the refrigerator hummed like it had opinions, and stuck to the door of it, dead center, at eye level so she couldn't pretend, was the envelope. Red stripe down the left side, Second notice. She hadn't opened it because she didn't need to open it. She knew the number by heart. The number lived behind her eyes now. It followed her into sleep. $1,140, due the 1st. It was the 24th. She'd done the math so many times it had stopped being math. It was just a wall now. On one side of the wall, the money she had. On the other side, the money she needed. And the door in that wall, the only door, was Douglas Pruitt. Right on cue, the laptop chimed. She looked at the clock in the corner of the screen. 12:41 a.m. Who calls at 12:41 in the morning? A man who knows you'll answer. A man who has done the same math she has, from the other direction, and likes his side of the wall just fine. She wiped under her eyes with the heel of her hand. She straightened her spine, that long, elegant line of her, chin up, the way her grandmother used to fix her at the dinner table, with one finger under the jaw. Posture is the last thing they can take, baby. She put on the face, the pleasant one, the one that costs. She clicked accept. Douglas Pruitt filled the frame too close, the way men who don't respect you always sit too close to the camera. Ruddy, rumpled, that gray goatee he never trimmed straight. His glasses had slid halfway down his nose, and he did not push them up. He just looked at her over the top of them, over the rims, down that whole slope of a face, and behind him, she could see his kitchen, warm, gold-lit, a wine glass sweating on the counter. Somebody in his house was making a life. On his desk, that same stained mug he brought to every call, brown ring inside like a tide line. Evelyn. He said her name like he was already tired of it. Good, you're up. Hi, Douglas. Warm. Even. I've got 19 through 23 cleaned up. I can send you. Yeah. Listen. He leaned back. The chair complained. We gotta talk about the rate. And something in her chest went very quiet and very still, the way a rabbit goes still. That stillness that is not calm, that is the opposite of calm. The rate, she said. The per page. He picked up the mug, looked in it, didn't drink. Times are what they are. I got the AI doing first passes now. Cleans up 80%. So what I'm really paying you for is the polish, the last mile, and the last mile just isn't worth what it used to be. You follow? She followed. Oh, she followed all the way down the hall and out the door. She kept her face where it was. We agreed on 12 a page, she said, for this book, in writing. We agreed on a ballpark. He set the mug down. Clink. I'm thinking 7's fair. 7's real fair, honestly for polish. 7. Her mind did the wall math before she could stop it, quick and cruel. The 40 pages left, times 7 instead of 12. The $200 that just evaporated out of her rent in a man's warm kitchen at 12:41 in the morning, while his wine sweated on the counter. And none of it, not one flicker of it, reached her face. That was a skill. That was years. Douglas! She kept her voice in the middle of its range. No high notes, no cracks. I turned down 2 other books to clear my calendar for this one. You know that. We talked about it in June. I do know that. He nodded, warm, agreeable, like they were building something together. And I appreciate it. That's exactly why I'm giving you first shot at the next 3. Loyalty runs both ways with me. You know that about me. Loyalty. He said it and reached off screen, and she heard the fridge in his kitchen open and thunk shut, the clink of him getting something, a man grazing his full pantry while he shaved $200 off a woman who was rationing rice. 7's an insult, and you know it's an insult, she said, still soft, still level, laying it down flat. He laughed. Not mean, worse than mean, fond. See, this is why I like you. You got fire. He pushed the glasses up his nose, finally, and looked at her clear over the desk. Fire don't pay rent, though, does it, hun? And there it was. He'd looked at her apartment on a dozen of these calls. The one bulb, the coat she wore indoors, the bareness of the wall behind her head, and he'd added it all up long ago, and he was telling her now, gently, that he knew exactly how little room she had to say no. He wasn't guessing. He was reading a page he'd already read. "The contract says 12, she said. After Heapley's Mybor, soft. Not a fight, a fact, laid down flat on the table between them. Douglas smiled. That was the worst part, that he smiled, slow and comfortable. A man settling deeper into a couch he owns. "The contract's got a revision clause, hon. I revise, you get a new number. That's how it reads. You want, I'll send you the paragraph." He shrugged one heavy shoulder. "Or, you can take the 7, and we stay friends. And I got 3 more manuscripts behind this one, with your name on 'em, your call. No pressure." No pressure. He said no pressure the way a man leans his whole weight on a door. Behind her, the wind slammed the window so hard the glass sang, and Evelyn didn't flinch, but her hand, her right hand, down out of frame, where he couldn't see, her right hand had gone up to her throat on its own. Fingers closed around the little silver necklace at her collarbone, the thin one, her grandmother's. She held it the way you hold a rail on a train that's braking too fast. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay?" He wanted the whole word. Men like him always make you say the whole word. "7's fine, Douglas. I'll finish it out at 7. Atta girl." He clapped his hands once. Done. Delighted. A man who got exactly what he sat down to get, and never doubted for a second that he would. "Get me the rest by Friday, yeah? And Evelyn." A wink, an actual wink, God help her. "You're a pro. That's why I keep you around." The call ended before she could answer. He always hung up first. It was a little thing. It was the whole thing. The screen dropped her back into the manuscript, chapter 19, that dead man's dialogue she'd made sing, and she looked at it and felt nothing come up to meet her. She closed the laptop. Not a slam. Just down, quiet. The click of the latch, dark. For a long minute she sat there in the buzzing lamplight and did not move, and the cold came in and settled on her shoulders like a coat nobody wanted to wear, and her hand was still up at her throat, still holding the necklace, thumb moving over the little links without her telling it to. Fingers doing what fingers do when a woman has run out of other things to hold. She got up. She crossed the 3 feet to the refrigerator, and she stood in front of the red-striped envelope, and she read the number through the paper, from memory, 1140, and she pressed her forehead against the cold door of the fridge and breathed. In through the nose, out slow. The way you breathe when crying is a luxury you have decided you cannot afford, because if you start, you lose the whole night, and she needed the night. She had 30-some pages to save at $7 a page. She did not cry. She was too tired to cry and too proud. And somewhere under both of those, there was a woman who had simply learned that it didn't help, that nobody came, that the ceiling of this cramped, damp box in the sky did not care how a good woman's voice cracked at 1 in the morning. She lifted her head. She wiped the fog of her breath off the metal with her sleeve. And she reached for the phone. It was old. God, it was old. Screen so scratched the light came through it milky, a spiderweb crack running up from the bottom left corner like a river on a map. The case long gone tacky, and gray at the edges from being held. She held it a lot. It was always in her hand, this phone, more than the pen, more than anything. She held it the way other people hold a cigarette they keep meaning to quit. She sat back down. She pulled her knees up into the chair, folded herself small, wool socks tucked under her, and she thumbed the phone awake, and the milky light lit her face up from below, the high cheekbones, the dark almond eyes gone glassy and enormous in the dark. She opened the thread. There was only ever the one thread that mattered. Up at the top, no name on it, just a number, 10 digits she'd never programmed a name into, because putting a name on it would have made it a real thing, and she needed it to not be a real thing. She needed it to be a wall she could talk to, a well she could drop coins in and never hear them land. She'd found the number 2 years ago. A wrong number, technically. She'd been trying to reach a print shop about a proof, fat-fingered a digit, and instead of a print shop, she got nothing. No answer, no voicemail box, no name, just a line that rang out into the dark and swallowed whatever you sent it. Dead. A dead number. And one bad night, a night worse than this one, she'd sent a message to that dead number instead of to any living person. Because there was no living person. Because a woman can be surrounded by a whole city of 8 million and still not have one single soul she can hand the ugly parts to. She'd typed, "I can't do this anymore," into the void, and hit send, and the void took it, and nothing came back, and somehow that was better. That was the thing nobody warns you about loneliness. Sometimes the only thing that fits is a listener who cannot answer, cannot pity you, cannot repeat it, cannot leave. So it became a habit, her worst habit and her kindest, the nightly confession, dropped into a phone that belonged to no one, a diary that texted back only silence, and silence, she had decided, was a kind of loyalty. She'd told this number things she had never said out loud to a living face, the name of the fear that woke her at 4, the exact shape of the loneliness, which was not a hole she'd figured out, but a weight, a thing you carried up 4 flights every night. She'd said good morning to it. She'd said good night to it more times than she could count, whispering the words with her thumbs while the city slept around her, and it had never once said good night back, and that was the deal. That was the whole quiet arrangement, and she had made her peace with the one-way street of it a long time ago. You take what fits. This fit. Nobody had to know. Nobody was ever going to know. That was the thing about it. It was hers. The only truly private thing she owned. Not the necklace, not the pages, not even her own name, which lived on somebody else's book. Just this. Just the little milky screen and the number that never answered. She started to type. He cut my rate again. 7 a page. I said okay. I don't know why I always say okay. Her thumbs moved fast now, the words spilling the way they never spilled to a face. The rent's due. It was due 3 weeks ago. I keep looking at the envelope like it's gonna change if I stare at it long enough. Grandma's necklace is the only thing in this apartment worth more than the coffee maker, and I've thought about it. I hate that I've thought about it. I would rather starve. I think I would rather starve. She stopped. She read it back. Her jaw was tight. She kept going. I'm so tired. Not sleepy tired. The other kind. The kind that gets in the marrow. I'm 28, and I write other people's whole lives for a living, and I don't have a single line of my own on any shelf anywhere in this world. And the worst part is, I'm not even angry anymore. I used to be angry. Anger at least keeps you warm. She paused. Her thumb hovered. Then, quieter, the words coming smaller, the way the truest ones always came out smaller. I keep hearing my grandmother tonight. She raised me. She used to lift my chin with one finger and tell me to keep my head where the world could see it, no matter what the world was doing to me. She's been gone 6 years. I've got her necklace on right now. I touch it when it gets bad, and I swear I can feel her hand. That's probably crazy. I don't care if it's crazy. Evelyn stopped typing. She swallowed hard, once, and the swallow hurt, that stone that comes up in the throat right before the tears, and she pressed her tongue to the roof of her mouth and breathed through her nose until the stone went back down where it came from. She had not cried in front of anyone in a long time. She was not about to start crying in front of no one. The wind pressed the window. The lamp held. Down in the street 4 floors below, a car hissed through standing water, and its headlights swept the ceiling once, left to right, a slow searchlight, and were gone. Evelyn didn't notice the headlights. She was inside the little milky screen, where it was warm, because she was making it warm with the only thing she had left to give, which was the truth, poured out to a stranger, who was not a stranger, because a stranger is a person, and this was no one. She thumbed to a new line. Her hand had come up to the necklace again, the left hand this time, holding the little silver chain while the right hand wrote. And she wasn't even aware she was doing it. That small anchoring, that reflex older than the phone, older than the debt, a thing her fingers learned at a kitchen table long ago from a woman who was gone now too. Some nights, she wrote, and stopped, and started over. Some nights you're the only thing I talk to that doesn't want anything from me. That's messed up. I know that's messed up, but you don't cut my rate. You don't hang up first. You just take it. Thank you for taking it. She almost smiled. It almost reached her mouth. Outside, the storm doubled down, rain going sideways now, sheeting off the eaves, the whole sky wringing itself out over the city. The apartment ticked and shifted. Somewhere in the building a pipe knocked, far off, muffled. She didn't hear it, or she heard it and filed it under old building, the way she'd filed 100 nights of noises, because a woman alone learns to make the dark ordinary, or she doesn't sleep at all. Her thumb hovered over the little arrow, send. She looked at everything she'd typed, the whole ugly honest spill of it, the rate and the rent and the necklace and the marrow tired, and for one held breath she felt the thing she always felt right here at the edge, that flush of shame, that pull to delete it all, to hold it in, to be the composed woman with the good posture that the world got to see. Then the cold touched the back of her neck, and the number waited, patient as it always was, the only patient thing in her life. And Evelyn Harper pressed send. The message went. A little gray bar crawled left to right along the top of the cracked screen, and then it was gone, swallowed into the 10 digits with no name, and Evelyn sat there with her thumb still hovering over glass that had already stopped needing her. She let out a breath she'd been holding since the word rent left her fingers. Sent. Done. Out of her hands now, floating in whatever dead place the other messages floated. 2 years deep. A graveyard of nights just like this one. She should have set the phone down. She knew the drill. Send it, put it face down, go to bed, wake up tomorrow with the ache a little lighter, because she'd handed it to something that never handed it back. That was the whole point of the number. You poured, it held. It asked for nothing. But her thumb moved on its own. She opened the keyboard again. The lamp above her buzzed, dropped a half second, came back yellow. Her breath fogged white and thin in front of her mouth. She typed 3 words the way she'd typed them 100 nights before. Small and soft. The closest thing she had to a prayer she didn't believe in anymore. Good night, miss you. She looked at it. 4 syllables of habit. She wasn't even sure who she missed. Her grandmother, maybe. The version of herself who used to think the writing would go somewhere. The idea of a person on the other end who'd say it back. She sent that too. The screen sat bright for 1 second, 2. Then it went dark. Timed out, the way it always did, dropping into black to save the battery it barely held. She caught her own face in the dead glass, warped, one eye lower than the other in the reflection, hair falling across the crack. Evelyn set the phone on the table, face down, cover up, gray fabric flat against wood. She stood. Her knees popped. She'd been folded in that chair too long, and the cold had climbed into the joints while she wasn't looking. She wrapped her arms around herself, walked the 4 steps that counted as crossing the room, and stopped at the window. Rain hit it sideways. The street lamp below flickered against the water running down the glass, and for a second, the whole street looked like it was melting. 4 floors down, nothing moved. No cars. No people. A city drowned and asleep and not thinking about her at all. She pressed her forehead to the window. The glass bit cold into her skin, and she let it, because the cold was at least something that was hers, something that answered when she leaned on it. The cold was honest, at least. The cold didn't cut your page rate and call you Han. She stayed there longer than she meant to, letting the glass numb the spot between her eyebrows, letting the melting street blur into color and water and nothing. Somewhere in the building, a pipe knocked. Once, twice, then quiet. Old bones settling. She'd learned the sounds of this place the way you learn a body you sleep next to. The radiator's tick, the elevator that groaned 2 floors down and never came up this high, the front door 4 flights below that thudded when the wind caught it. None of them meant anything. None of them ever had. Behind her, on the table, the phone lit up. She didn't see it. Her back was to it. But the room changed. A pale square of light bloomed up off the wood and threw a soft glow across the ceiling, and Evelyn felt the shift before she understood it, the way you feel someone step into a room behind you. She turned around. The phone was face down, but light was leaking out from under it, spilling around the edges of the gray cover, a thin white halo pulsing against the table, lit up, awake, for no reason. She stared at it. Nothing lit that phone on its own. No apps that pushed, no notifications from anyone, because there was no one. The number thread was the only thing she ever opened, and the number never, ever wrote back. 2 years. Not a syllable, not a single dancing dot. It was a wall she talked to. Walls don't answer. Her heart started up, slow and heavy, one beat, then another, each one landing in her throat. Probably nothing, probably a low battery warning, probably the thing dying, one last flare before it dropped dead, and she'd pick it up and see 10% and a red line and plug it into the wall by the mattress and go to sleep. Probably. She crossed back. 4 steps that felt longer than 4 steps. She reached out, and her hand, her own hand, was not steady, and she watched it not be steady with a kind of distant surprise, like it belonged to somebody else. Her fingertips grazed the fabric of the cover. Warm. The phone was warm. Warmer than a dying thing should be. Warm like it had been working. She turned the phone over. The thread was open. Her 2 messages sat at the bottom where she'd left them. Blue, aligned right. Good night, miss you. And under it, under her words, on the left side, gray, where nothing had ever been in 2 years of nights. Seen. Just that, the small word, the timestamp, 12:53 a.m. Seen. Evelyn read it 3 times. Her brain refused it the first time, tried to file it as something else, a glitch, a mistranslation, a thing the phone did when it was dying. But it wasn't dying. The battery sat fat and green in the corner. The word held, small and gray and certain. Somebody had opened it. Somebody was on the other end of the number that belonged to no one, and they had read, "Good night, miss you," and the phone had told her so. She laughed. 1 breath, no sound behind it. The kind of laugh the body makes when it's trying to shove a thing back into the box marked not real. She wiped her hand down her face. She was tired. She was so tired the tiredness had teeth now, and tired people saw things. Tired people read words that weren't there. She looked again. Seen. 12:53. She thumbed the screen dark on purpose, held it a beat, woke it back up, half sure the word would be gone, that it had been a smear of exhaustion across dead glass. The lock screen bloomed. She tapped in. The thread, her 2 blue bubbles, and under them, unmoved, patient, that one small gray word, still there. No, she said, out loud, to the empty apartment, to the rain, to nobody, and the phone buzzed in her hand. It jumped against her palm, a hard, short vibration, and she nearly dropped it, her fingers snapping shut around it on reflex. The screen flashed. A gray bubble climbed up from the bottom on the left side, settling into place under her own words, and the letters resolved 1 line at a time, and Evelyn's whole body went still. Not as much as me. 4 words. Gray, aligned, left, right under, good night, miss you. The room tilted. She heard her own breath now, loud, ragged, coming too fast through her mouth, and she couldn't slow it. Her thumb hovered over the words like touching them would tell her they were fake, would smear them off the glass. She didn't touch them, she just looked, and the 4 words looked back, and they didn't go away. Not as much as me. Somebody had answered. Not a machine. Machines didn't say miss. Machines didn't fold themselves into her exact rhythm, her exact soft nothing, and hand it back gentle. Machines didn't wait 2 years to speak and then, when they finally did, choose 4 words that landed like a hand pressed flat against her sternum. Somebody with a heartbeat had read every ugly thing she'd typed. The rent, the $7, the grandmother's necklace she'd thought about selling, the marrow-deep tired, all of it. 2 years of it, and they'd waited, silent, the whole time, and tonight of all nights, they'd chosen to speak. Not as much as me. Miss you, she'd written, and they'd said, back at her, more than you know. Her legs stopped trusting her. She sat down hard in the chair, missed the center of it, caught herself on the edge with her free hand. The phone shook in the other. She stared at the thread, scrolled up an inch with a thumb that could barely land, saw her own words marching up the screen, night after night after night, blue, 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 all of them one-sided, all of them into the dark, and now this. 2 gray bubbles, awake, real, watching. She scrolled further, faster, thumb skidding, hunting for the seam where it all changed. Some other reply buried up in the months, some earlier crack in the silence she'd missed. There was none, only her, only the flat blue river of everything she'd confessed, running up and up into the dark of 2 years, and then, at the very bottom, tonight, the water finally hit something and stopped. They'd let her talk that whole time, every night, and they'd said nothing, and read everything. The lamp buzzed and dimmed, and she flinched at it, the small yellow flicker suddenly loud as a shout, in a room where she'd stopped being alone. How long, she thought, and the thought made her sick. How long had somebody been reading? Not tonight. Tonight they'd answered, but the reading could be old. Weeks, months, every confession she'd ever thrown into that number. Every 3 a.m. she'd typed things she'd never said to a living face, the fear and the shame and the raw private middle of her. Somebody had a phone in their hand that lit up with all of it. Somebody knew the number for her rent. Somebody knew about the necklace. Somebody knew she was alone. And she'd told them. That was the part that turned her stomach cold. Nobody had stolen it from her. She'd handed it over, night after night, freely, gladly, because the silence had felt safe, because a thing that never answered had felt like the one place in the world she could set herself down without cost. She'd built a room out of that silence and lived in it, and now the wall had a face behind it, and the face had been listening the whole time she thought she was safe. Her hands went cold in a new way, a way that had nothing to do with the radiator. She had to think. She made herself think. Wrong number, she told herself, gripping the word like a rail. She'd dialed wrong 2 years ago, off by a digit, reaching for a print shop and landing here. So the number was somebody's. Of course it was somebody's. Numbers belong to people. Maybe it had sat unused. Maybe someone new got it, some stranger, and tonight they'd finally looked at the flood of messages from a woman they didn't know and thought it was funny, thought they'd play, thought they'd poke the sad lady at 1 in the morning. That was it. That had to be it. Some bored stranger with a cruel thumb. It didn't feel like cruelty. A prank ran and hid. A prank sent a laughing face, a string of ugly words, and bailed. It didn't answer soft. It didn't answer in her own key. Not as much as me had reached down under everything she'd typed and pulled up the one true thing and held it out to her, palm open, and that was not the move of a bored stranger. That was the move of someone who'd been holding their breath as long as she had. It didn't feel like cruelty. That was the thing that kept her breath fast. Not as much as me didn't read like a prank. It read like it had been waiting to be said. It read like relief. The necklace at her throat rose and fell fast with her breathing, the thin silver catching the lamp, and she pressed 2 fingers to it without meaning to. The old reflex, the reach for something that used to steady her. It didn't steady her now. Her pulse ran under her fingertips, quick and light and scared, and the silver only carried it back to her, proof of how fast her own heart had gone. Evelyn typed. She didn't decide to. Her hands did it, shaking, hunting the letters. "Who is this?" No question mark. She stared at it, deleted it, her thumb smearing the words away, typed it again, deleted it again. What was she doing? What did you say to a ghost that had finally opened its mouth? Her heart slammed against the necklace at her collarbone, and she felt the thin silver of it jump with each beat. She set the phone down on the table, then picked it up again. Couldn't leave it, couldn't look away from it either. She held it against her chest for a second, both hands, like a child, like it could be a comfort and a threat in the same object, and maybe it always had been. She'd stand up, she'd plug it in, she'd go to the mattress and pull the blanket over her head, and in the morning, this would be a strange story she told no one, because there was no one to tell. The number had a new owner. Fine. Terrible, embarrassing, but fine. She'd stop. She'd never write it again. She'd let the dead line stay dead. That was the plan. Simple, sane. She said the shape of it to herself, and felt her pulse ease off half a notch, felt her shoulders drop a finger's width from her ears. Block the number in the morning. Delete the thread. Burn the 2 years of nights down to nothing, and never think about the 10 digits again. People survived stranger embarrassments. She would survive this one. She wiped her palm on her trousers. The phone had gone slick with the heat of her own grip. Evelyn stood up, and she heard it. A sound, from outside the room, low, a single deep tone, round and full, 2 notes falling, the kind of sound a phone makes when a message lands, but bigger, richer, a heavier instrument than the thin dying chirp of the thing in her own hand. It came from the hall, from the other side of her door. Not the street, not below, not the pipes or the elevator or the wind at the front door 4 flights down. The hall, her hall, the narrow strip of carpet outside her own apartment, the one that ended at the stairwell, the one no one walked at 1 in the morning, because no one on this floor was awake, and no one from outside had a reason to climb 4 flights in a storm to stand there. Someone was standing there. She froze mid-step, 1 foot forward, the phone clutched against her sweater, and every hair on her arms stood up at once. The apartment held its breath with her, rain on the glass, steady, indifferent. The radiator ticking as it cooled, slower now, each tick farther from the last, and under those, fading now, the last of that low tone dying in the hallway, right there, close, on the far side of the wooden door that stood between her chair and the stairs. A notification, a phone, somebody's phone, behind her door. She knew that kind of sound, not the tinny scrape her own cracked speaker made, a full one, deep and expensive, the sound a phone makes when it costs more than her rent, the sound of a message landing in a hand that could afford to be found. It had rung out clean and low and then folded back into the dark of the hallway, and now the dark held its shape and gave nothing back. Her own phone, the reply. Not as much as me. And then, seconds later, a phone in the hall. She wanted the 2 things to be strangers to each other. She stood there and begged them silently to be a coincidence. A neighbor she'd never met home late, a wrong floor, a delivery gone stupid at 1 in the morning. She reached for every version of the story, where the sound in the hall had nothing to do with the words on her glass. She couldn't hold a single one of them. Her eyes went to it. The door, old wood, painted over a dozen times, the paint chipped near the handle, where 100 tenants had shouldered through. The chain hung loose in its track. She never used the chain. 4 floors up. Who climbed 4 floors? Who came to her door at 1 in the morning? Nobody. Nobody ever. The chain was just a thing that hung there. The chain hung there now, unhooked, useless. A little brass line swinging faintly against the frame. Evelyn looked down at the phone in her hands. The screen was still on, the thread still open. Not as much as me still sitting there, gray, patient. She looked back up at the door. She hadn't imagined the sound. She wanted to have imagined it. She reached for it, rapid in tired, in stress, in a woman alone in a storm hearing the building settle. But her body knew the difference. That was a message tone. That was a phone getting a message. 2 feet, maybe 3, on the other side of the wood. And her own phone had just gone quiet. Not as much as me, scene 12:53. The math arrived in her chest before her mind would say it, cold and total, dropping through her like a stone through black water. Her eyes cut to the window. 4 floors, sideways rain, a wet ledge, a drop into the dark that would kill her as sure as anything waiting in the hall. No fire escape on this side. She'd looked once, months ago, on a night she couldn't have named the reason for. Nothing out there but air and the melting street. Her eyes cut back to the door. The only way out was the way something had already come in close to. She took 1 slow step backward. The floorboard under her heel let out a small cry, and she stopped dead, teeth clenched, as if the sound of her own weight could give her away, as if it hadn't already been given away, as if whoever stood breathing on the other side of that door didn't already know the exact shape of the woman inside. The phone was still warm in her hands. The hall was silent now. No more tone, no footsteps yet, no voice, nothing. Just the awful, listening quiet of a space that wasn't empty, a quiet with weight to it, a quiet that was waiting for her to move so it could hear where she was. Evelyn stared at the door, and the loose chain swung, and the rain came down, and somewhere on the other side of an inch of old painted wood, so close she could have crossed to it in 3 steps, someone she had been talking to for 2 years stood in the dark with a phone in his hand. The silence on the other side of the door was not empty. It had weight. It leaned. Evelyn stood with the phone crushed against her sternum, both hands over it like she could smother the light, and she counted her own heartbeat, because it was the only thing in the room still moving. 1, 2, the chain swung a ½ inch and went still. 3, 4, and then she heard it, not a knock, not a voice, but shoes, leather, slow. 2 steps down the corridor, unhurried, the sound of a man who had nowhere else to be, and then the steps stopped, right there, where the toe of a boot would be if it were pointed at her threshold. She did not breathe out. She held it, the whole lungful, until her chest burned. The steps did not come closer. That was the thing that undid her. A man who wanted in kicks the door. A man who is lost keeps walking. This man had arrived. He was standing exactly where he meant to stand, and he was waiting, the way you wait for a kettle you already know is about to sing. Then the voice came through the wood. You always work too late. Low, even. A voice with all the corners sanded off it, warm the way a knife is warm after you've held it in your fist. It came through an inch of old painted pine, like the pine was a suggestion. Evelyn's spine locked. She knew that sentence, not the sound of it. She had never heard the sound of it, but the shape. She had written that shape. She had typed, I always work too late, into a dead number at some 2 a.m. months ago, alone, believing the words fell into nothing. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. The lamp buzzes, the voice said. The yellow one. You keep meaning to change the bulb. You never do. You said it hums, like a fly caught in a jar. Her eyes cut to the lamp, the yellow one, humming. Stop! she said. It came out as a whisper with the bottom cut off it. Stop it. He didn't. He was not cruel about it. And that was worse. He recited her the way a man recites a prayer he's said so many times it's gone smooth in his mouth. The radiator, you stopped bleeding it 3 weeks ago. You said your grandmother would have known how, that she could fix anything with a butter knife and a bad word. A pause, small, deliberate. You wrote that one at 1:14 in the morning. I remember because you spelled butter wrong and then you fixed it. Evelyn's back hit the wall beside the door. She hadn't decided to move. Her legs had decided for her. The plaster was cold through the sweater, and she pressed into it anyway, as far from the wood as the room would let her go, which was 3 feet, which was nothing. Every word she had ever poured into that phone was walking back toward her now, out of the dark, wearing shoes. You want me to keep going? Not a question. The rent is $11.40. Do the first. You know the number without looking because you look at it every day on the refrigerator, under the magnet shaped like a lemon. Something in his voice shifted, went quieter, went closer, like he'd tilted his head to the seam of the door. You thought about selling the necklace. You hated yourself for thinking it. You typed it, and then you sat there for 11 minutes before you hit send. 11 minutes, Evelyn. He said her name. She had never signed her name. 2 years of messages into the void, and she had never once written Evelyn. Because the whole point, the whole safety of it, was that the void didn't know her. The void couldn't use it, and the void had just said it out loud in the hallway of her building at 1 in the morning, gentle as a hand on the back of the neck. The phone slipped. She caught it against her hip, fumbling, and the screen flared awake at the motion, throwing her own face up at her, hollow-eyed, mouth open. She turned it dark against her thigh with the flat of her hand. Who are you? She got it all the way out this time, 4 steps of nothing between the words. Who are you? You know who I am. The wood carried it soft. You've been talking to me every night for 2 years. That number is dead. Her voice climbed, and she hauled it back down, because loud felt like a door she couldn't afford to open. It doesn't belong to anyone. I dialed it wrong. It was a mistake. It was a printer. I was trying to reach a printer. I know. Something almost like tenderness moved under it. I know exactly what you were trying to reach. You told me that too. The 3rd night. You apologized for the wrong number and then you kept typing anyway because it was easier to talk to a stranger who couldn't answer. The shoes shifted, a quarter turn, leather on old tile. I could always answer. I chose not to. You needed the silence more than you needed a voice, so I gave you the silence. Evelyn slid down an inch against the wall and caught herself, palm flat to the plaster, and made herself stand. Made herself. Because the other option was the floor, and if she went to the floor, she wasn't sure the floor would give her back. You read them. Barely sound. All of them. Every one. 2 years. Every one, he said again, and there was no boast in it, which was the horror. A boast she could have fought. This was just a man, telling her the weather. The night your check bounced. The night you didn't eat, because you were saving it for the light bill, and the light bill won anyway. The nights you didn't say anything, just sent a full stop. 1 period. I read those too. Those were the loudest ones. Evelyn's gaze went sideways, hunting the room without her head moving, the way an animal counts exits. The kitchen drawer, 6 feet off, with the one dull knife. The heavy mug by the laptop. The lamp cord. Nothing in this room had ever been a weapon, and her body was pricing all of it anyway, and the whole time the voice kept going, soft, patient, laying her own life out on the floor between them, like it was folding laundry. Tonight, Seo Tae-hyun said, and she flinched, because tonight meant now, meant he was current, meant there was no old version of her he'd stopped watching. Tonight the man on the video call cut your rate. $12 a page to 7. You said 7 was fine. You didn't mean it. You put your forehead on the refrigerator after, and you counted to 10 so you wouldn't cry, and you got to 10, and you didn't cry. A pause. You never do. Do you know how many times I've watched you get to 10? Stop knowing things about me. Her voice cracked down the middle. Stop it. You fix the crying scenes hardest. He said it like he was giving her something, like it was a gift he'd been saving. In the books. Somebody else's books, with somebody else's name on them, and when a character weeps, you go back over that paragraph 4, 5 times, until it's perfect, until it's the truest thing on the page, and then you send it away with a stranger's name on top, and you never get to keep the one true thing you made. The wood carried a long, quiet breath. You told the phone that at 3 in the morning, you said, I make everyone else's grief beautiful, and I never get to set mine down. You misspelled nothing that night. You wrote it clean, first try. That's how I knew you'd been carrying it a long time. Her hand found the necklace at her throat without permission, the way it always did, the thin silver warm from her own skin, and for one wild second she wanted to rip it off, because he knew about it, because he'd been in the room where it lived, in her chest, the whole time she thought she was alone. Don't. His voice caught the movement she made without seeing it, or maybe he just knew her that well. Don't take it off. You touch it when you're scared. You told me. You said her hand comes back through it. Evelyn made a sound, small, torn, involuntary, and she pressed her knuckles to her mouth to shove it back in, because she would not. Anya? She would not give him that too. The corridor went quiet. She could hear the storm now that she was listening for anything else. Rain going sideways against the one window at the end of the hall, the building creaking the way old buildings talk to themselves, and under it, close, the sound of a man breathing slow through his nose, patient, on the other side of the wood, waiting for her to catch up to a thing he had known for 2 years. How? She wet her lips. How are you at my door? How do you know which door? I own the building. The 3 words landed and kept landing, like a stone dropped down a well that has no bottom. 12 months now, through a company, and that company through another one. So your lease still has the old name on it, and your rent still goes to the same account, and you never once had a reason to look. A beat. You wrote to me about the water pressure in April. I fixed it in a week. You noticed. You said maybe your luck was turning. She remembered. God help her, she remembered typing it. Maybe things are turning. Into the dark, grateful to no one, and no one had a name, and no one had a building, and no one had reached down through the pipes to make the water run hot, because she'd mentioned it once to a phone. The cameras, she said. And it wasn't a guess anymore. It was arithmetic. It was every red pin light in the lobby she'd walked past for a year without looking up. You watch I watch you come home. No apology in it. I know when you eat and when you forget. I know you take the stairs when the elevator light flickers, because the flicker makes you think of the hospital where she died. You never told the phone that one. That one I learned by watching. The shoes came a half step closer and stopped. And now the voice was nearly level with the seam, nearly at her ear through the pine. This whole block is mine, Evelyn. The deli on the corner, the garage, the building across the street where the man sits in the window. All of it. You have been walking around inside something that belongs to me, and you have been telling it your secrets, and it has been keeping every single one. Evelyn shut her eyes. Behind them, the 2 years reorganized themselves in one long, sickening slide. Every night she'd thought she was screaming into a canyon, and the canyon had a face, and the face had been reading, and the face owned the walls of the canyon, and the floor, and the door she was leaning her whole weight against right now to keep it shut, except the door was his too. Her eyes came open. The number, she said, because she had to hold on to one impossible thing at a time, or all of them would take her at once. Nobody keeps a dead number. Nobody keeps a line for 2 years just to. Her breath snagged. Why? Why would you keep it on? The silence that came back was different. The first crack she'd heard in him. It went on a second too long, a second and a half, and when the voice returned, it had lost a fraction of its terrible evenness. Just a fraction, just enough for her to hear that there was something underneath the calm, and that the something had a floor, and the floor was pain. That, he said, is the one thing I'm not going to explain through a door. Rain, breathing, her own pulse in the silver at her throat. Evelyn's free hand had drifted, without her telling it to, back to the phone against her hip. She turned it in her palm. The screen woke. 3 digits, that was all it would take. 3 digits, and a voice on the other end who didn't own the building, and her thumb was already moving toward the keypad when he spoke again, and what he said stopped it dead. The call won't connect from your apartment, not a threat, a weather report. It hasn't for a month. You notice the bars drop when you walk in the door and you decided it was the storm, or the old wiring, or your cheap phone. You wrote to me that even the signal had given up on you. A beat, waited. It wasn't the storm. Her thumb froze over the 9. She looked at the top of the screen. 1 bar, then none, then 1, flickering, the way the elevator light flickered, the way everything in her life flickered right at the moment she reached for it. You could still try, Seo Taehyun offered, gentle, almost inviting, like a man holding a door for someone he already knows won't walk out. I'd wait. I'm good at waiting. But when the operator asks for the address, you'll have to tell them the building, and the building answers to me before it answers to them. The phone lowered an inch in her hand. Not surrender, something colder than surrender, the arithmetic finishing itself. So you're going to open it, he said. Or I am. I won't. She said it fast, on reflex, a child's no, and hated how thin it came out. I won't open it. I know. Almost gentle, almost fond. That's why I said, or I am. And she heard it then, under his voice, small and unmistakable, and worse than anything he had said. A soft metal sound, a shift of weight in a pocket, the particular chime of keys settling against keys. He didn't rattle them. He just let her hear that they were there, in his hand now, resting, a whole ring of them, and that one of them was hers. Evelyn's eyes went to the deadbolt. It was thrown. She'd thrown it hours ago out of habit, the way she did every night, believing it meant something. A half-inch of brass, a tongue of metal in a strike plate her landlord had installed, in a frame her landlord owned, in a lock her landlord had the key to, because that is what a landlord is, and the landlord was him, and the deadbolt she was staring at had never once in 2 years been anything but a courtesy he was choosing to honor. You don't have to be afraid of the door, he said, reading the silence, reading her the way he'd read her 1,000 nights. The door was never the thing keeping you safe. I was. You just didn't know my name yet. Then say it. Her voice shook, and she let it, because holding it steady was costing more than the shaking would. You know mine. You've known mine for 2 years. Say yours. Another pause, the longest one. She could feel him deciding, on the far side of an inch of wood, whether to hand her the last thing he had that she didn't. When it came quiet, almost like something set down carefully on a table between them. Seo Taehyun. The name meant nothing to her. It was 2 syllables and a family, and she had never heard it, and it should have been a relief that it was a stranger's name, except the way he said it. He said it the way you say a name you've stopped saying out loud, a name that has to be dusted off, and even through the door she could hear that giving it to her cost him, that it opened something, that a man like this did not hand his name to a woman shaking against a wall unless he had already decided she was going to be standing much, much closer before the night was through. Seo Taehyun, she repeated, because she needed to hear her own mouth make it real. Now you've said it, he said, and she heard the key find the metal, not turn, just find it. Just settle into the dark of the lock, seated, waiting, the way the shoes had settled in the hall, the way the man himself had settled into 2 years of her silence. Arrived, patient, in no hurry at all, because the ending was already his, and he was only letting her feel the weight of it before it closed. Wait, the word tore out of her. Both hands came off the phone and flattened against the door, useless, warm, feeling the faint cold coming through the paint from the hall side, from him. Wait, please, just 1 more minute. Give me 1 more minute. The key did not turn. You gave me 2 years of minutes, Seo Taehyun said, so softly it was almost kind, almost a thing you'd whisper to someone you loved in the dark. 1 more won't change what's on the other side of this door. But he waited. She felt him wait, felt it in the held silence, her palms pressed flat to the wood, and his key seated in the lock, and the storm throwing itself against the window at the end of the hall. 1 more minute, he agreed at last, and she heard the key ease back out of the lock, unturned, held. You can have it. You've earned a minute. But understand what you're spending it on. There's no one to call. There's no window that isn't 4 floors up. There's no version of this where you walk past me in that hall. The voice came level with the seam again, low, almost intimate. The only door in this building that was ever really yours was the one on that phone, and you handed me the key to that one yourself, every night, for 2 years. Evelyn stood in the middle of her cold apartment with the necklace warm at her throat and the dead phone dark in her fist, and she understood, finally, all the way down, the true shape of the thing that had closed around her, that it had not sprung tonight, that it had never sprung at all, that it had shut slowly over 2 years with her own hands doing the shutting, every confession another tumbler falling into place. The line she'd trusted because it couldn't answer. It had always been able to answer. It had only been waiting, the way he was waiting now, for her to run all the way out of the dark and into the one room he owned every wall of. Her forehead came down against the door. The wood was cool, and on the other side, close enough that an inch of old paint was the only thing that had ever stood between them, she heard him do the same. The soft sound of a man leaning his weight into the door from the far side, meeting her there, forehead to forehead, through everything he owned. Your minute's almost gone, Seo Taehyun said, very quietly. Are you going to open it, Evelyn, or do you want me to? And she had no fire escape, and no $50, and no signal, and no dead number left to run to, because the dead number was breathing against the other side of her door, with a ring of keys in his hand, and her whole life memorized behind his teeth. She closed her eyes. Her hand rose to the deadbolt on its own, cold brass, throne, hers, his, and rested there, not turning it, not yet, the last inch of choice she still had, held between 2 fingers in the dark. Her fingers stayed on the brass, and the brass stayed cold, and nothing turned. 2 breaths. 3. The deadbolt did not move because she would not let it, and for 1 thin second that was the whole world. A woman, a bolt, a door, and a man on the other side who had all the time on earth. Then his voice came again, lower, almost gentle, the way you talk to something you don't want to spook. You're doing the math, he said. The window, the stairs, the one neighbor on this floor who plays his television too loud. Evelyn's eyes cut left before she could stop them. To the wall, to 4B, where the sitcom laughter usually leaked through at this hour. He moved out in May, Taehyun said. The unit's been empty since. I never relisted it. Her stomach dropped through the floor. She pressed her spine harder into the plaster beside the frame, the kohler biting into her collarbone, where her free hand had climbed without asking. Nobody's coming, Evelyn. Not because they won't. Because there's no one left on this hallway but us. She opened her mouth, closed it. The math he named was already dead in her chest. You want to know how I know your Tuesdays, he said. The word landed strange, Tuesdays. Specific. A day of the week. Thrown out like a card face up on a table. You get the good coffee on Tuesdays, he went on, unhurried. The bodega on the corner. You buy it the day the check clears, and you make it last the week, and by Sunday you're drinking the burnt stuff from the bottom of the tin and pretending you can't taste the difference. Her breath snagged. She had never written that. Not once. Not to the dead number, not to anyone. It lived nowhere but inside her own small apartment and her own small routine. You didn't read that, she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. That's not in the phone. No, he agreed. That one I was told. Told. The word sat there. Ugly. Wrong-shaped. Told by who, she said. And it wasn't a question so much as a stone she was setting down to see how far it fell. A pause. On his side of the door she heard the smallest shift of weight. Leather on old wood. You know him, Taehyun said. You like him. No. Her mind ran the hallway like a hand down a banister. The faces of the building. The super who never came. The woman on 2 with the cats. The kid who delivered menus, and then the one face that had ever been kind to her in this cold box of a building, the one who fixed her buzzer without being asked, the one who carried her groceries up the 4 flights the week her wrist was bad, the one who said good morning like he meant it. No, she said out loud. Not him. Yoon Sang-hoon, Taehyun said, and saying the name was like turning a key in her too. Her hand came off the deadbolt, just fell, landed at her side, useless. The janitor, the gentle one. Thin man, tired eyes, that little scar cutting through his eyebrow that made his smile look shy instead of sad. The gray-blue jacket, the ring of keys on his belt that jingled 2 floors down so you always knew he was coming. Sang-hoon, who had once told her, leaning on his mop, laughing, that she worked too hard, that she should eat more, that his own daughter back home was about her age. He doesn't work for this building, Taehyun said. He works for me. He has for 6 years. The mop is real. Everything he does with it is cover. Evelyn's knees wanted to go. She slid a hand flat against the wall to keep upright, palms squeaking on the cold paint. He fixed my buzzer, she said. Stupid thing to say. It fell out of her anyway. He installed the microphone behind it, Taehyun said, and there was no cruelty in it, which was somehow the worst part. Just a man reading off a ledger. The morning he carried your groceries, he counted them. Told me you were buying less. Told me you'd started splitting 1 meal across 2 days. That's when I fixed the water pressure. You never connected those. You mouth. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. Every good morning, every kindness, a man with a clipboard behind his eyes, writing her down, the one warm face in a year of cold ones, and it had been a camera all along, wearing skin. He reported your Tuesdays, Taehyun said, your lights. The night you cried in the stairwell in March and thought no one saw, he saw. He didn't touch you, he never would. That's not what he's for. He's eyes. A beat. He's the reason I stopped waiting behind the number and started standing behind the door. The room tilted. Evelyn put both hands flat on the wall now, needing all of it, needing something that would hold. She thought of the daughter. Sang-hoon had told her about a daughter, a photo pulled from a cracked wallet, a girl in a graduation gown, and his whole tired face going soft as he said her name. Had that been true? Had any of it? Or was the daughter another mop, another prop, a thing to hand a lonely woman so she'd lower her guard and keep talking in the elevator where the microphone could hear her clean? The photo, she said. The words came out flat, scraped. He showed me a picture of his kid. Silence on the other side. Then, evenly, his daughter is real. He does love her. Not everything he gave you was a lie, Evelyn. That's what makes him good at it. That landed harder than a lie would have. She'd have known what to do with a lie. This, a real man, real love in him, and every warm word still bent to the work of watching her. This she had no wall for. 6 years, she said. You said 6 years. He came to me before you moved in. He was already here when your lease was signed. When I bought the building, I inherited him with it. The way I inherited the water pipes and the bad wiring, and you. A pause. He liked you. That was real too. He asked me, once, to leave you alone. Her eyes stung. And you said? I said I would decide what leaving you alone meant. Something hot and awful climbed Evelyn's throat. Not tears, bigger than tears. The particular sickness of learning that a thing you leaned on was hollow, that the leaning itself had been the point. Why are you telling me this? She got out. Because you'd have opened the door and looked for him, Taehyun said simply. You'd have thought, Sang-hoon is on this floor. Sang-hoon is kind. Sang-hoon will help. I'm telling you, so you stop waiting for a rescue that was never coming. So you look at the door and see only me. The hallway went quiet. The storm filled the quiet. Rain hammering the window at her back. Wind finding the gap in the frame it always found. The building creaking around them like a ship. Evelyn looked at the door, really looked at it. The chipped paint. The brass bolt she'd thrown 1,000 nights believing it was hers. The chain hanging slack in its track, never once fastened, because she'd never had a reason to fear the hallway. She had one now. Her mind kept clawing back to the hallway, the way a tongue keeps finding a broken tooth. Every morning she'd passed that gray-blue jacket and felt, for 3 seconds, less alone. She'd built a small warmth out of a stranger's good morning, hoarded it, spent it against the cold of this place, and the stranger had been counting her groceries the whole time, carrying the count down the stairs to a man in a black suit who wrote it in a book. She thought she might be sick. She swallowed it down. She counted, the way her grandmother had taught her, silent and slow, 1, 2, and made it to 4 before the counting stopped meaning anything. I'm going to open it, Taehyun said. Not a threat. A weather report. This is what happens next. Don't. The word left her small. She hated how small. You had your minute, he said. You held the bolt. I let you hold it because it was yours to hold, but we both know it was never locked to me. She heard it then, the sound she would hear again in her sleep for the rest of her life. A key, not fumbled, not searched for on the ring, chosen, slid into the lock with the ease of a man who had done it before, in the dark, more than once, when she wasn't home. The deadbolt turned itself under her frozen hand. One slow rotation, the brass warm now where his fingers drove it, warm through the door, warm where hers had just been. The bolt slid back into the frame with a sound like a swallowed breath. Evelyn stumbled backward, 1 step, 2, into the middle of her own small room, the table with the dead phone on it at her hip, the yellow lamp buzzing overhead like it had all night, like nothing had changed, like the whole world hadn't just come off its hinges. The door opened. It opened slow. No kick, no shove, no drama. It swung inward on the hinge she kept meaning to oil, that low groan she knew by heart, and the hallway light spilled in around a shape that filled the frame corner to corner. For a moment, he was only a silhouette, the corridor bulb behind him, all edges, no face, a black cutout of a man in a doorway that had only ever framed her own reflection when she came home late and caught herself in the glass of the storm door downstairs. Now it framed him, and the size of him rewrote the size of everything else. Her table shrank, her lamp shrank, the 4 walls she'd frozen and sweated and wept inside for a year, pulled in tight and mean around them both. He had to lower his head to come through. That was the first thing, the sheer wrongness of the scale of him in her doorway, a doorway built for ordinary people, and this man ducking under it the way you'd duck under a low branch, shoulders that took the whole width. He stepped over the threshold, and the floorboard that always complained under her stayed silent under him, and she couldn't understand how something that big could move like water. The cold came in with him, and under the cold, the smell. Rain. Rain in wool, that heavy, wet animal smell of a soaked overcoat. And beneath the rain, warmer, darker, whiskey. Not sour, good whiskey, the kind that costs more than her rent, the smell of it on a man's breath in a small room, mixing with the cold and the wet until she couldn't tell if the shudder running through her was fear or just her body reading the air. He straightened up inside her apartment. His head cleared the doorframe by inches, and for 1 second, as he lifted his chin to take in the room, the collar of his coat fell away from his neck and she saw it. A slash of black ink riding up out of the shirt, the beginning of a wing, there and then gone, as his head came level and the collar swallowed it again. She backed into the edge of the table, felt the dead phone shiver against her hip. Her hand found it on pure animal instinct and closed around it. Cold glass, cracked corner, hers, and she held it the way a child holds a light in the dark, like the holding was a spell. 2 years she'd typed into that little screen and believed the words went nowhere, believed the not answering was the same as no one listening, and the whole time the listener had been building toward this exact doorway, this exact minute, folding every confession into a shape she couldn't see, until it stood in front of her wearing a $3,000 coat. Her thumb pressed the dark glass. Nothing lit. Of course nothing lit. There was no one to write to. He was here. Taehyun looked at her. It was the first time. 2 years of words and no face, and now the face, and it was worse than any monster she'd built in the dark of the hallway, because it was calm, because the eyes that found hers were black and still and almost tender, the way a man looks at something he's been thinking about for a long, long time. She'd expected rage, or hunger, some ugly thing she could name and brace against. What she got was worse, patience. The face of a man who had already won and knew it, and was in no hurry, because the winning was not the part he'd come for. Water ran off him. His hair was dark with rain at the temples, one strand fallen loose from the rest, and he made no move to push it back. Rain beaded on the shoulders of the wool, and slid and dropped. Each drop hit her floor, and she heard it. That was how quiet the room had gone. She could hear a man drip. She realized her chest was heaving. She made herself slow it, made herself lift her chin the way her grandmother's finger had once lifted it, a lifetime ago, in a warmer room. If he wanted her small, he would have to make her small. She would not hand it to him. He saw the chin come up. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not a smile. The ghost of the place, a smile would go. "There she is," he said softly, as if he'd been waiting to meet her. As if the woman on the page and the woman in the room had finally become the same person, and he approved. He held his ground just inside the door, making no move toward her, rain sliding off the hem of his coat onto her floor, drop by drop, a small dark stain spreading on the boards. "Hello, Evelyn," he said. Out loud, in the same room, the voice she'd heard through the wood, now unmuffled, low and even, and impossibly close. No door left to soften it. She said nothing. Her whole body had gone to a single held note. His gaze moved off her face, slow, taking inventory, and traveled the room. The envelope on the fridge with the red band. The manuscript pages fanned by the laptop, someone else's grief marked up in her handwriting. The single lamp. The window with no fire escape. The mug she used because the handle on the other one had broken. He read it all the way she imagined he read her messages, without hurry, without missing a thing, and his jaw tightened by a fraction at the envelope, just once, there and gone. Then his eyes came back to her hand, to the phone crushed against her chest. He didn't reach for it. Not yet. That would come, but for now he only looked at it, at the cracked, cheap thing she was clutching like it could save her, and something crossed his face that she couldn't name and didn't want to. Something that on any other man she'd have called grief. "You can put it down," he said quietly. "It already reached me. Everything you sent. All of it." "Stay there," she said. It surprised them both, her voice, finding the floor, standing on it. He stopped where he was, hands loose at his sides, and tilted his head a fraction, and the movement pulled the collar again, and the black wing climbed up out of the shirt for half a second before the wool closed back over it. A crow, ink and a crow, riding the side of his neck, there and gone like a thing that lived under his skin. "You gave me an order," he said, not angry, almost pleased. "In your own home, with no lock left, and no phone that works, and no one on the floor." The corner of his mouth did the thing again. "Sang-hoon said you had a spine. I told him spines are easy to see on paper. Yours held up in the room. Good. Don't talk about him like he's yours." "He is mine," Taehyun said, without heat. "You are the one who thought he was yours." Her fingers tightened instead of loosening. The collar rose and fell against her collarbone with her breathing, fast and shallow, silver catching the sick yellow lamplight. Behind him, through the open door, the empty hallway stretched away into the dark. No Sang-hoon, no neighbor, no sound but the storm and the drip of his coat on her floor. The one exit she had was the exact width of the man standing in it. He reached back, slow, telegraphed, so she'd see there was no rush in him at all, and pushed the door. It swung shut behind him with the same low groan it always made. The hallway light vanished. The latch clicked into the frame, soft as a period at the end of a sentence. And the small, cold room that had been hers alone for 2 years was, for the first time, not hers alone. The lamp buzzed. The storm threw itself at the window and could not get in. Between them, the floor held a spreading dark stain of rainwater, and the smell of him filled the space where her privacy used to be. Wet wool, cold night, and that low, expensive burn of whiskey that turned her stomach and her head at once. He looked at her across 4 feet of her own home. She looked back and made herself hold it, the phone crushed to her heart, the collar rising fast at her throat. "You wrote to me for 2 years, Taehyun said. His voice filled the little room the way his shoulders filled the door. "Every night, every fear. You gave it all to the dark and thanked the dark for taking it." He took 1 step. The floorboard stayed silent under him. 4 feet became 3. "I'm the dark, Evelyn." She backed a half step and hit the table. Nowhere left. Behind her the window and the 4-story drop. In front of her the man. Between them nothing but the last thin distance he had not yet closed. The whiskey came off him warm, and the rain came off him cold, and both of them filled her head at once, and she understood, with a clarity that frightened her more than the fear did, that he had not come here to hurt her. Hurting her would have been simple. He'd come for something with no shape she could hold, something built out of 2 years of her own words, and there was no wall in the world she could put between herself and a man who already knew everything she had. "What do you want?" she whispered. He looked at her a long moment. The lamp buzzed. The rain came down. "Sit down," he said, quiet as the storm. "We have a great deal to talk about, you and I." A pause. 2 years' worth. She didn't sit. Her knees hit the edge of the table behind her, and she stayed standing, spine locked, chin up where her grandmother had put it years ago. The chair was right there. He'd told her to take it. She left it empty between them like a small, stubborn refusal, the last one she had room for. Taehyun looked at the empty chair, then at her. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not a smile. The idea of one, considered and set down. "You don't have to make this hard," he said. "You broke into my apartment. I used a key. You had it made. I already owned the lock." He said it the way a man reads a receipt. Flat. Done. "The door was always mine, Evelyn. You've been paying rent to sleep behind it." She felt that land somewhere under the ribs and refused to show him where. Her hand found the necklace at her collarbone, the thin silver warm now, from her own pulse. She made herself drop it. She didn't want him watching her hold on to the one soft thing left. He turned before she could answer. 3 steps to the door. The overcoat moved with him, still dark at the shoulders from the rain, dripping a small map onto her floor. He reached for the deadbolt she'd been gripping minutes ago, and he threw it. 1 turn. The brass tongue slid home with a sound she knew. Then a second turn, and that sound she didn't know, because her lock only went one way, except it didn't. It never had. It had always had a second throw and a third, and she'd never once used them, because a chain that hung loose and a bolt that clicked once had felt, in the dark, like enough. 3rd turn. The bolt seated deep in the frame with a low, final chunk. He tried the handle after, twice, testing his own work. The door held like a wall. "There," he said, quiet. "Now nobody interrupts." She counted the turns after they'd already happened, the way you count stairs you've already fallen down. 1 she knew. 2 and 3 she'd owned for how long? A year? Longer? The lock had been capable of this the entire time she'd lived here, and she'd used a third of it, and told herself the loose chain made up the difference. She'd built a whole feeling of safe out of hardware she never fully turned. "You never used the second throw," he said, reading her face. "Or the third. I know. I watched the bolt on the camera in the hall. 1 click every night, and then the chain you never latched." He said it without mockery, which somehow scraped worse. "You thought locking up all the way meant you were scared, so you only ever did it halfway. To feel brave. Don't tell me what I thought. I'm not guessing." He touched the flat of the door once, almost fond. "You wrote it to me. If I lock it all the way, it means I believe someone's coming. 1:40 in the morning, back in spring." His head tipped, and the collar shifted, and the ink climbed and dropped. "Somebody was always coming, Evelyn. You just aimed the message at the wrong door." Her mouth had gone dry. She swallowed against it. "The neighbors. You know there are no neighbors." He said it gently, which was worse. "You knew that before I told you. You just liked pretending the walls had people in them." He came back into the room, unhurried, and the space seemed to fold down around his shoulders. He was a big man in a small kitchen. He made her ceiling look low. He passed the counter and his hand went to his side, and for 1 bright second her whole body braced for something she couldn't name. He only lifted the keyring off his belt. He dropped it on the counter. It landed hard, a heavy brass fist of keys, and they spread out with a bright clatter across the laminate. 6, 7, 8 of them, and one of them small and dull and ordinary, the exact twin of the key in her own coat pocket by the door. Her key, her lock, her home, laid out on her own counter like inventory. She looked at the keys and couldn't stop looking at them. "Yes," he said, following her eyes. "That one." She didn't ask which. He knew she knew. The radiator ticked in the corner, cooling. The lamp buzzed its yellow buzz. Outside, the rain kept throwing itself sideways at glass, and none of it could get in, and, she understood with a cold, clean drop in her stomach, none of it could get out either. "Sit down, Evelyn." No. He didn't repeat it. That was the thing that scared her most, that he asked once, and then let the no just hang there, unbothered, like a coat he'd hold as long as it took. He had time. He had all of it. He owned the building the time was happening inside. He looked at the envelope on the fridge, the red band, the lemon magnet. His jaw did a small thing, a single tightening, there and gone. 1140, he said. Don't. Due on the 1st. It's the 24th. He recited it the way he'd recited everything, without cruelty, which was its own kind of cruelty, the reading out of a life she'd whispered into a phone she thought was empty. You have 400 and change. You were going to ask Douglas for an advance on the pages, and you already knew he'd say no, because he cut you tonight. 7 a page. You said 7's fine. Stop. You didn't mean fine. I said stop. Her voice cracked on it, and she hated the crack. Hated that he heard it. Hated that his eyes softened when he did, like her breaking was a thing he'd been waiting to be tender about. He stopped. He let the quiet sit. He was good at quiet. He'd spent 2 years being quiet at her, reading everything, answering nothing, and the silence had felt like safety, and it had been a room he was standing in the whole time. You have no money, he said, once she'd caught her breath. Not a taunt, a fact, set on the table between them like the keys. No signal that reaches past that door. No fire escape on this side. You checked. Months ago, you stood at that window and looked, and you wrote to me that the drop was 4 floors and you weren't brave enough. No neighbor. No one at the deli who knows your last name. No one, Evelyn, who is going to knock on this door tonight and ask if you're all right. Each one landed. He set them down one at a time, patient, like a man emptying his pockets of stones. She made herself breathe. In through the nose, out slow, the count her grandmother taught her for when the world got loud. 1, 2. She got to 4 and lost it. Her eyes went sideways, cataloging the room the way they had all night. The dull knife in the drawer, the pot on the 2-burner stove, the cord of the lamp, and every object came back the same answer. Too small, too slow, too far from a man who moved like water and had already locked the only way out behind his own back. He watched her eyes make the circuit. He let her finish it. He didn't tense, didn't step, didn't reach for whatever it was men like him reached for. He simply waited for her to arrive where he already stood, which was at the end of the arithmetic, where there was nothing. You're doing the math again, he said. You did it through the door. You're doing it now. Knife, mug, window. A small shake of his head. I'll save you the time. There's no line in this room that ends anywhere but this table. And you, she said. Her chin came up again. She found it from somewhere. You think that makes me yours. I think, he said. You already told me everything that would. He tilted his head, and the collar shifted, and for half a breath the black edge of ink climbed his neck and vanished again. You just didn't know who was reading. She backed up the half-inch the table would allow. Her hand went behind her, fingers closing on the one thing on the table that was hers. The phone. The old phone with the milk-scratched screen and the cracked corner. The gray case worn soft. Dead now, black glass, but hers. She brought it up against her chest, the way she'd been holding it for an hour, the way you hold the last warm thing in a cold room. He watched her do it. He watched the way a man watches something he's about to take, deciding only on the timing. Give me the phone, Evelyn. The floor dropped out of her voice. No, you don't need it anymore. It's mine. It was never really yours. He took a step. The floor didn't creak for him. It creaked for everyone else, and stayed silent for him, and she'd stopped being surprised by that, and started being afraid of it. The number on it is mine. The line is mine. Every word you ever put into it came to me. The only thing on that phone that belongs to you is the case, and you can keep the case. Get away from me. Give me the phone, and I won't have to take it. She turned her shoulder, curling around it, both hands now, knuckles white on the gray plastic. It was such a small thing to fight over. A dead phone, a cracked screen. But it was the mouth she'd whispered into for 2 years, when there was no one. The one place she'd been allowed to be tired out loud, to be scared, to say I thought about selling my grandmother's necklace, and have nobody flinch. And if he took it, if he put it in that pocket, then there was no room left in the whole world that was only hers. Not one. He'd have all of them. Please, she said, and hated the word the second it was out. Something crossed his face at please, not triumph. That would have been easier. It looked, for a flicker, almost like grief. like the word had cost him something too. Like somewhere behind those calm black eyes, a door had opened onto a room she couldn't see. Then it closed, and he was patient again, and he held out his hand. Wide palm, steady, the antique ring dull on the smallest finger. A hand that had done things, offered to her open and unhurried, asking for the last private inch of her life like it was a coat check. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I have never wanted to hurt you. I want the phone." "Then it's the same thing." His hand didn't move. "No. You'd be taking the only." She stopped. She wouldn't hand him that too. She wouldn't tell the thief what the thing was worth. Her thumb moved on the dead glass without deciding to, a reflex 2 years deep, the small stroke that woke the screen on nights she couldn't sleep. Nothing woke. Black glass, black room, black coat. She pressed it harder to her chest anyway. Both arms crossed over it, the way you hold a rib that's cracked. "You want to say it," he said, watching the way she curled. "Go on, say what it is." "So you can keep it too?" "No." Her voice came out low and even, and it surprised her, the steadiness of it, dredged up from the same place as the chin. "You already took the words. You don't get the reason." Something in his face bent at that. Respect, maybe. She didn't want his respect. It sat on her like a hand on the back of the neck. But he already knew. Of course he knew. He knew because she'd written it, some 2 a.m. months back, half asleep and honest. "This line is the only thing I own that's mine." He'd read it. He'd kept it. He was reciting her own inventory back at her by holding out his hand for the one item she'd flagged as priceless. "I know what it is to you," he said, very low. "That's why I'm asking, with my hand out, instead of just taking it. You'll notice I'm asking. That's not a kindness. It's the only one on the menu tonight." She held on. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. The lamp buzzed. The bolt sat triple-locked in the frame behind him. And she understood, standing there with a dead phone crushed to her sternum, that the waiting was the whole point. That he could stand in her kitchen with his hand out until the storm blew itself out and the sun came up over a city he half-owned, and nothing would change, because there was no version of the next hour that didn't end with the phone in his pocket. The only thing she got to decide was whether she handed it over or he peeled it out of her fingers. That was the choice. That was all of it. The last, smallest scrap. Her grandmother's voice, from somewhere. "Chin up, baby. Don't you make yourself small for a man who's already made you small." She lifted her chin, and she put the phone in his hand. Not gently. She pressed it into his palm hard, screen first, so the cracked corner bit him if it was going to bit anybody, and she let go before her fingers could change their mind. Choosing it, because if she was going to lose it, she was going to be the one who let go. She was going to keep that. He could have the phone. He didn't get the flinch. His fingers closed around it, warm, dry, enormous. For a second he just held it, this small, worn thing swallowed in his hand, and he looked down at it with an expression she couldn't read and didn't want to. That grief flicker again, deeper this time, his thumb moving once across the dead black glass like he was wiping something off it, or checking it was real. Then he slid it into the inside pocket of his coat, left side, over the chest, gone. The pocket settled flat. You couldn't even tell it was there, and the room got very quiet and very large, and she was standing in the middle of it with empty hands. She looked at her own fingers. They were still curled around the shape of it, the muscle memory of 2 years, holding a phone that wasn't there. She made them open. She made them hang at her sides. It took effort, like setting down something heavy she'd forgotten she was carrying. "There," he said, soft, almost sorry. "Now it can't ring while we talk. Now it's just us. Give it back." "No. You said you weren't going to hurt me." "I'm not." He looked at her, And for the first time, there was something underneath the calm that had a floor and a bottom to it. Something old. Taking the phone isn't hurting you, Evelyn. Keeping you from calling out isn't hurting you. If I wanted to hurt you, I'd have let you keep it, and let you write me every night for another 2 years, and never once let you know I was on the other end, reading you fall apart alone. His voice dropped. That would have been the cruel thing. The kind thing was to knock. You didn't knock. No, he said. I let myself in. Old habit. And the corner of his mouth moved again. And it wasn't a smile. It was the ruin of one. And it scared her more than any threat could have. She backed around the table, putting the small square of it between them, the manuscript pages scattering under her hip. 40 pages of somebody else's grief she'd been paid $7 each to make beautiful. Her hand knocked the good mug with the broken handle, and it rocked and didn't fall. She caught the edge of the counter. The keys were right there under her palm, cold brass, 8 keys, the whole building in a fistful, and for one wild second her fingers spread toward them. Don't, he said, not even sharp. He hadn't moved. There's nothing on that ring that opens a door you can get through tonight, and you'd only cut yourself trying. Her hand stopped over the keys. She left them where they lay. She had no phone, no signal, no money on the fridge but a number in red she knew by heart. No fire escape, no neighbor, no name at the deli, no line of her own on any shelf in any store in any city, and now not even the dead number. Not even the one dark little mouth she'd whispered into when there was nobody, because the nobody had a face and a triple-locked door, and her whole life folded into his coat pocket over his heart. The refuge had never been a refuge. It had been his hand, open, the whole time. She'd been curling up inside a fist that had simply chosen not to close. Until tonight. Sit down, Evelyn, he said, a third time. And this time he pulled the chair out for her, one finger hooked on the top rail, dragging it back from the table, the legs stuttering on the floor, and he stood behind it, waiting, a host at a table he owned in a room he owned in a building he owned, offering her the only seat left in her own kitchen. She looked at the chair. She looked at the door with 3 turns of brass sunk into the frame. She looked at the flat pocket over his heart, where the last private inch of her was now sleeping in the dark. Her legs were shaking. She could feel them going, the adrenaline burning down to nothing, the long day and the longer night finally arriving in her knees all at once. If she didn't sit, she was going to fall, and she wasn't going to fall in front of him. She'd decided that somewhere back around please, and she was holding it now like the last coin in her pocket. So she sat. She sat because her body chose it, not because he told her, and she made herself believe the difference mattered, because the difference was the only thing she had left to own. He pushed the chair in an inch, gentle, like a man seating a woman at dinner. Then he came around the table, unhurried, and he pulled out the second chair, the one that faced hers, and he lowered all of that height into it slow, folding down, until his black eyes were level with hers across 2 feet of cheap laminate and 40 pages of borrowed grief. The overcoat pooled around him. The rain and whiskey came off him in the warm, bad air of the little room. He set his forearms on the table, and the platinum watch caught the lamp, and he laced his fingers, patient, and he looked at her the way she'd always imagined the number looked at her words, completely, without hurry, without letting a single one fall. Good, he said. The dead phone sat silent in his pocket. Her hands lay empty in her lap. The bolt held. The storm threw itself at the glass and got nowhere. Now, Taehyun said, 2 years. Let's start at the beginning. She didn't start at the beginning. She looked at the pocket where her phone had gone, the left one, over his chest, and she asked the only thing left in her mouth. Why did you keep it on? Taehyun's fingers, laced on the table, went still. Not the stillness of a man deciding what to say, The stillness of a man who'd said it to himself 1,000 times in the dark and never once out loud. "You asked me that through the door," he said. "I told you I wouldn't answer through a door. The door's open now." Something moved behind his eyes, slow. Deep down, he had never planned to tell her sitting in a cold kitchen under a buzzing lamp, but the plan had died the first night she wrote him about her grandmother. "The number was my brother's," he said. The lamp hummed. The radiator ticked, cooling. Evelyn's hand rose halfway to the necklace and stopped in the air, because some part of her already knew where this was going and didn't want to arrive. "Seo Tae-min," he said the name the way you set something breakable on a shelf. He was 24. 3 years ago. Was. She sat with that word. It sat back with her. That number rang in his pocket, Tae-hyun said. Then it rang in a drawer. Then it rang nowhere, because there was no more Tae-min to pick it up. Everyone told me to shut the line off. Dead account. Money for nothing. His jaw moved once. I paid it every month. For 3 years I paid a phone bill for a boy in the ground. Evelyn's chest pulled tight. She hated that it did. 2 years ago it buzzed, he said. Middle of the night, I thought. He stopped. The first crack she'd heard through the door split wider now, in the open, with a face attached to it. For 1 second I thought it was him. That's what it does to you. 2 years of nothing, and one buzz, and your whole body says his name before your brain can stop it. "It was me," she whispered. "It was you." His eyes came up. "Sorry, wrong number. Ignore this." Then, 20 minutes later, "Okay, I know you're not there, but the printer thing fell through, and I don't have anyone to tell." The blood went out of her face. She remembered typing that. She remembered deciding the silence was safe precisely because no one lived behind it. "I should have shut it off that night," Tae-hyun said. "I opened it to shut it off, and you were in there, talking to my dead brother's phone like it was a diary that couldn't hurt you. So you read it. I read it. For 2 years. For 2 years. He didn't flinch from it. You want me to call it something clean. I won't. I sat in a room that cost more than this building, and I read a stranger's confessions off my brother's line, because it was the only place his number ever lit up again. Every time you wrote, the phone woke. Every good night. Every miss you." He reached into his coat again, not for her phone this time, for his own, the heavy one, the one that had made the rich, dropping tone in the hallway 2 hours ago. He set it on the table between them, screen up, and thumbed it once. The lock screen lit. A boy in a light hoodie, mid-laugh, head tipped back, an open smile, with none of the stone in it. Younger than the man across the table, softer in the jaw, but the same nose, the same shape of the eyes. The resemblance hit her before she read it. "Tae-hyun Min," Tae-hyun said. "That's the last photo of him that isn't a headstone." Evelyn's eyes went from the screen to his face and back. She hadn't wanted a face for the ghost. Now there was one, laughing, and it made the whole thing real in a way the words never had. "You made him your lock screen. On the phone that carries his number." "Yeah." He didn't touch the image. 3 years. "I unlock past his face 40 times a day. Some men build a shrine. I built a habit." She looked at the boy's open mouth, frozen mid-laugh, and thought of every night she'd typed grief into that exact line, never knowing it woke a photograph of a dead man in a room across the city. Evelyn's hand found the necklace at last, cold silver, her grandmother's cold silver. "I wasn't saying it to you," she said. "The miss you. I was saying it to nobody, to a whole. I know, low, even. You missed a grandmother who counted your breaths. I read a phone that used to be my brother." He turned one hand over on the table, palm up, empty. 2 people grieving into the same deadline, and neither of us knew the other was there. That's the truth you wanted through the door. That's why I couldn't say it standing in a hallway like a man collecting rent. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the storm kept throwing itself at the glass and getting nowhere. She should have felt only fear. She caught herself feeling something worse, that the man across the table had been, for 2 years, the one thing she thought she didn't have, a reader. Someone on the other side of the silence who did not hang up first. How did he die? She asked. She didn't know why she asked. The question was out before the sense of it caught up. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't give it. His thumb went to the edge of the phone and stopped there. The kind of way men in my life die, he said. Not old, not in a bed. He was the soft one. He was the one who was going to get out. A pause with weight in it. He didn't. I was supposed to keep the soft ones soft. I kept the wrong things instead. I kept a phone bill. The lamp buzzed. Evelyn understood, all at once, that the number had never been a diary that couldn't hurt her. It was a wound that someone else kept open on purpose, and she had been pouring herself into it for 2 years, and the wound had been listening. You answered tonight, she said. After 2 years. Why tonight? Because tonight, you wrote that you almost sold her necklace. His gaze dropped to her collarbone, to her fingers wrapped around the silver, and I put my hand on my brother's phone to sell the number the next morning. 2 years I kept it. Tonight, we both decided to let go on the same night. A breath. I couldn't let you do it, and I couldn't do it either, so I typed scene. You comforted a monster, she said, and didn't know if she meant it as an accusation or a fact. You comforted a man who buries people, Taehyun said. Both are true. You did it for 2 years without knowing. Ask yourself why that doesn't feel like nothing to you right now. That's the part that scares you, not the locks. She said nothing, because he was right, and because saying so out loud would cost more than the rent. You could have written back, she said instead. Any night. 2 years of nights. 1 word and I'd have stopped. I'd have blocked the number and never thought about it again. I know. Then why didn't you? Because the night I typed a word back was the night it stopped being his line and started being ours. He picked the heavy phone up, dark now, and slid it away into the coat. The boy's laughing face went with it. As long as I stayed silent, I was just a man reading his dead brother's phone. The second I answered, I was a man who wanted the woman on the other end. I knew what I was, the whole time. I waited 2 years to admit it, because admitting it meant I'd come. And here I am. Her breath went shallow. He'd said it plainly, the way he said everything, and there was nowhere in the small kitchen to put it. You picked tonight, she said, because I finally heard enough to match you. His eyes moved over her, the raised chin, the hand on the silver, the exhaustion she couldn't hide anymore. I picked tonight because you finally sounded like me, he said. 2 people who make everyone else's grief beautiful and never get to set their own down. You wrote that at 3 in the morning. I read it at 3:01. I've read a lot of things off that phone. That one I couldn't put down. He stood. He didn't rush it. He rose the way weather arrives, and the chair went back without a scrape, and the whole small kitchen rearranged itself around the fact of him standing. He drew her phone from the inside pocket, the cracked corner, the bleached gray glass, looked at it once, thumb passing over the dead screen, the way you'd touch a photograph. Then he slid it back. It stayed in his pocket, over his chest, where the other dead line used to buzz. We're not talking here anymore, he said. Evelyn's spine locked. You said we'd talk. We will. Somewhere the storm can't listen. He came around the table, unhurried, and the room ran out of corners. Stand up, Evelyn. No. You keep saying that word to me, almost fond. Every time you say it, you stand up straighter. You've been telling me no all night with your chin. It's the best thing about you. He held out his hand, not grabbing, offered. Now stand up, because your legs are done shaking and you know it. They were. She hated that they were. She stood. His hand closed around her upper arm, warm, Careful, absolute, the grip of a man who had never once in his life needed to squeeze to be sure of holding something. He turned her toward the door with the 3 locks he had thrown himself. "My coat," she said, stupidly, because it was cold, because the mind reaches for small true things when the big ones won't fit. "You won't need it where we're going. It's warm there." He undid the deadbolt. 1, 2, 3. Each turn loud in the dead apartment, and the hallway breathed its cold at them. "It's always warm there. I made sure. You wrote once that you'd forgotten what warm felt like." She had. In February, at 2 a.m., to a dead boy's phone. The hallway was empty and long, and hers no longer. He walked her past the vacant 4B, past the doorman's desk where no doorman sat, and the elevator stood open and waiting, like it had been told to wait. It had. The light didn't flicker. Of course it didn't. He owned the flicker too. "You take the stairs when it stutters," he said, guiding her in. Because of the hospital, the one where she died, he pressed a button she'd never seen lit. Above the top floor, no number, just a keyhole he turned with a small key from the ring. "Not tonight. Tonight it holds still for you." The doors closed. The storm cut off mid-howl. The car climbed. It didn't feel like climbing. It felt like the building swallowing. Evelyn watched the numbers stop meaning anything, watched them give up entirely near the top, and then there was only the hum and his reflection in the steel beside hers. Her small and straight-backed, him a wall of black wool with a crow hidden under the collar. She catalogued the things she was losing floor by floor, the lamp that buzzed, the radiator she'd stopped bleeding, the 40 pages she'd never finish for a man who paid $7 a page, the 400 and change in an account that couldn't cover the rent under the lemon magnet. All of it shrinking below her like the street had shrunk the night she first looked out and found no fire escape. She'd spent 2 years mapping the ways out of that apartment. She'd never once mapped the way out of him, because until tonight there had been no him to map. "Say something," she said. "The quiet is worse." "You'll have quiet like you've never had," he said. "You'll learn to love it. You loved the silence on the line. This is the same silence, just bigger. That silence didn't have a lock on it. That silence didn't keep you warm either." He watched the numbers go. "You wrote to a phone because it couldn't answer. You wanted to be heard without being seen. I'm the version of that with a heartbeat, Evelyn. You built me out of 2 years of talking into the dark. I just showed up with a face." She had no answer for that, and the not having sat in her chest like a stone. The doors opened on it. Not an apartment, a vault made to look like a home. Steel where walls should be, seamed and matte, and past them a floor of pale marble that ran on into low warm light. No storm here, no wind, no rain throwing itself at anything. The silence pressed on her ears like altitude, unnatural, engineered, a room built to make the outside world stop existing. She understood then that he had never been going to leave her in the cold apartment. The apartment was where he found her. This was where he kept things. Steel doors slid shut behind them with a sound like a held breath released. The last of the world, the tick of the radiator, the far complaint of the pipes, the storm she'd hated all night, went out, gone. She hadn't known she'd miss the storm until it was taken. "Sang-hoon," she said. "One last thread. The man with the daughter. Where?" "Downstairs, doing his job. He asked me once to leave you alone." Taehyun's hand left her arm. "I told him I'd decide what that meant. I decided tonight." He walked her back, not roughly, a palm at the small of her spine, steering, until the cold of the marble wall met her shoulders, and there was nowhere further to go. No window at her back this time, no 4-story drop, no mathematics of escape, just stone, and him, and the warm, dead air. She pressed her palms flat to the stone behind her. It was cool and smooth and endless, and it did not give. the way nothing in this room gave. Somewhere past the steel, there had to be a city, a storm, a street where a woman named Evelyn Harper still had an apartment with an unpaid envelope on the fridge. In here, that woman felt like someone she'd invented to survive the walk to the elevator. He set one forearm against the marble beside her head. The platinum watch caught the low light. He tilted his head, and the crow came up out of the collar, the black wing at the nape, and for once he didn't hide it. "Here's the deal, Evelyn." His voice dropped to the register he'd used through the door, but there was no door now, only inches. "You said all of it to a machine. Every night, the rent, the necklace, the tiredness in the marrow. I make everyone else's grief beautiful, and I never get to set mine down." His eyes held hers, black and calm, and terribly patient. "You typed it into the dark and let the dark keep it. I'm the dark. I kept it. Now I want it out loud." "No. You typed it to my brother's ghost." His head tilted the other way. The wing disappeared. "Say it to the man who read it. Once. Out loud. That's all I've ever wanted from you. 2 years, and it's the only thing I never got. The sound of your voice saying the thing instead of typing it. Why does it matter how you get it?" "Because I'm done reading you," he said. "I want to hear you. And if I don't, then we stand here. No threat in it. Just fact. Poured flat. The most frightening thing he'd said all night. I've waited 2 years for your voice. I can wait until morning. I can wait until you're tired of your own silence, the way I got tired of mine. You're the one who taught me how long a person can go without an answer, Evelyn. I learned it from you." Her throat worked. She thought of the 11 minutes she'd once waited before pressing send on a message about the necklace. He'd counted those minutes. He counted everything. He would count these too, and he would not blink. "You already have all of it," she said. "Every word. In your pocket. On your dead brother's phone. What's left for me to say?" The version I read was for a ghost. His voice dropped lower, close enough that she felt it more than heard it. "You dressed it up for a machine that couldn't hurt you. I don't want the dressed up one. I want the one you'd only ever say to a person who was really listening. A breath. I was always really listening. You just didn't know it counted." Her chin was still up, grandmother's chin. Her hand was at the necklace, and the silver was warm now, finally warm, warmed between her skin and this airless room he'd built to keep the cold off her forever. She thought of the number that had never hung up first, 2 years of just take it. She thought of the boy in the light hoodie whose photograph woke every time she typed a good night, whose phone had cradled her every word. She thought of her grandmother lifting her chin with one finger, and of the silver at her throat gone warm at last, in a room built to hold the cold off her forever. She thought that the only person who had ever heard all of her was the last person on earth she would have chosen, and that he had heard her anyway, in the silence, across 2 years of nights, when she was certain no one on the other side could. The awful part wasn't the locks. He'd been right about that too. The awful part was that some starved thing in her had wanted for 2 years exactly this, to be heard to the bottom by someone who would not look away and would not hang up. She'd asked the dark for it every night. The dark had a heartbeat now, and it was standing one breath from her mouth, waiting the way it had always waited. "You want the confession," she said. "I want yours, in your voice, now." The lamp back in the apartment would still be buzzing, 4 floors down and a world away, over an empty chair. No one was coming. There was no line left to write to. There was only the man who had been the line all along, one breath from her mouth, waiting the way he'd waited 2 years, patiently, certain, without hanging up. Evelyn opened her lips. The silence leaned in to take it. And in the second before the first word, before the first real touch of his hand against her jaw, warm and certain on skin no one had touched in longer than she'd let herself count, the light went out of the room, and the story she'd been telling a dead phone for 2 years finally had someone alive to hear the end of it. In the dark he'd promised her, in the warm he'd built, where nobody, ever again, would interrupt. Black. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Tell me, K-Fam, have you ever poured your loneliest confessions into a number that never answered? And if the silence on the other side had been listening all along, mourning its own loss, would that comfort you or terrify you? Mark my words, K-Fam, some doors, once opened, never close again. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about grief, obsessive love, and hidden truths, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.